When Riverside started, it started in my home. My son got me interested in this whole story of education because of the really bleak experience he was having when he started school. My response to my son subsequently, and I will do a better job. My story started not with changing the world. It was really about wondering whether I can make a difference in my child's life. That was it. It was a small story of a mother. It is not a story of an education because I don't come from education. I came from a design background. Design for Change uses the design framework, which is feel, imagine, do, and share, to help children believe that they are not helpless, that change is possible, and that they can drive it. Multiple elements of the school were designed, keeping the child in mind. Elements that the home had that we wanted to use when we created the building, like a bathroom in every class, especially for the younger children, because they have to feel like it's a home. Transparency became a very big story. If you can see, if you sit in Riverside, and if you just watch around, you can see children everywhere. The other design detail we did intentionally was have no place in the building that was cut off for children. So we have no staff room, we have the principal's cabin. It's all, this sitting right here, I could be running a principal's meeting. We believe that the child should have first ownership of the entire space.
This space makes me very comfortable and gives me a lot of freedom to be who I am.
Design for Change now has a global conference that we do every year. We've had over 20 countries participate. And then countries are starting to bid to take this conference to their countries. Approach is an acronym for a protagonist in every child. That is essentially telling every city that their child matters, that the child, if you invest in a child, the child will then invest back in the city. So it's an attempt to make every city child-friendly.
What Riverside has taught me, if all citizens of India come together as a family, then this place can be a much, much better place for all of us.
For all of those who think that making children good human beings is all very well, what about the marks? Riverside outperforms the top 10 schools in India in math, science, and English. So there.
The place has given me the freedom to know myself better.
These are experiences that children have at Riverside, which help them understand their areas of interest.
It's about how they bring out the raw talent in you and how they nurture it in a manner such that the talent becomes your strength.
It doesn't matter even if you have really top grades. An average student who is very committed to being mindful and really having empathy for others and thinking about others is way more valuable.
She has this energy, this aura around her that just makes us feel so involved in whatever we're doing. She makes us feel energized. She makes us feel good about ourselves and who we are.
I think Riverside attempts every day to build citizen leaders, children who will graduate with passion and compassion, who believe that the opportunities are not just right for them, but they will do right by the opportunity.
Welcome to our CANversation. I'm happy to have KIRAN and Sarah KUPKE with us today. We initially wanted to have this conversation on Valentine's Day, as KIRAN shared an amazing video with ECIS about love, which we've also shared with you, and hopefully you've had time to watch prior to this event. I met KIRAN last year when we both worked on the United Nations SDG goals. I was immediately struck by her can-do attitude. We had an instant connection, our passion for listening to our students and helping them develop creative confidence, putting them at the centre of all we do. KIRAN is a designer who became a teacher, a principal, who grew into an education reformer and subsequently morphed into a social entrepreneur. A trained graphic designer using the language of design to develop not only curriculum innovation, but also social programs. This in India is no mean feat. She always says we need to listen, 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 and not tell, tell, tell. We also have Sarah KUPKE with us. I hope you all watched the wonderful video showing Sarah's campus. I met Sarah in Luxembourg in 2018 and have learned much from Sarah. Sarah is an inspirational lady and a very well-loved leader. A student recently described Sarah as giving, always listening, and having lots of ideas. Sarah spent the first 8 years of her teaching career in primary education and secondary special needs. She taught at ISS from 1990 to 1995, before exploring the Waldorf school system, working for a language services and becoming the founding director of Heidelberg International School from 2000 to 2004. In September 2004, she came to the International School of Stuttgart and Schindelfeld as a head of campus. Welcome, ladies. It's just wonderful to have you both here. So let's start talking about the can-do attitude that you both have. And Kiran, also, I'd like to congratulate Riverside on their 20th anniversary this year.
Yay!
How has the can-do attitude helped during this time of the biggest crisis of a generation? Kiran, we'll start with you if that's okay.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining, and thank you, Cam, for this opportunity. I wish we really did it on Valentine's, but I keep saying because love and the idea of any revolution through love is really what the can-do attitude really is. I think more than any other time, the virus or this pandemic has just, I think, highlighted and probably unmasked everything that was dysfunctional about education. And it kind of like literally became a portal of, going through and figuring out what is really important, what is necessary. I think so much of us realized what we can do without. And I think we can really do without structure, and we can really do without the idea of just the academic programs, etc. And I think realize that finally it's the heart that matters. And so when you look at the can do and what I call the I can mindset, it really starts with a belief system. And very often our children are not given beliefs. They're given information, and they're given, sort of knowledge, but they're not given beliefs. And beliefs shape our worldview. And very often our beliefs start with what we see and encounter every single day. So the act of mimicking or imitation is fundamental to how we learn our first way of life. And so when children observe and mimic their elders or the people around them, they start believing in what the world manifests itself as. So if I am only viewing adults or information around me that is timid or shy or lack of courage, it's less likely that I might tell you to be courageous, but I will not be it. So I think that can do is really a set of beliefs we give our children to understand that whilst the world is so uncertain and so volatile and so ambiguous, if you have that belief that you are not helpless, that change is possible and that you can drive it, and that locus of interest stands and centers around you and in your heart, you will never feel helpless. In fact, you will enjoy uncertainty. So I think education didn't understand that, because education was so driven around structure and it had to be a certain way and this is how things are done, that it gave us an opportunity to recognize that flow and fluidity and beliefs will matter a lot. So yeah, so that's really where we have to build that sense of that I'm capable, I am strong, I'm courageous, and my presence matters, because with others I will make the world a better place. So that kind of captures.
To have, and actually it really hits the nail on the head as to beliefs are so important.
Yeah,
because education is very much built on imparting knowledge, and that's why I thought it was really great the way you say listen, 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 don't tell, tell, tell. Sarah, hello. So how are you doing the can-do attitude at your school? I know you're such a can-do person.
Yes, certainly. And I think just following on from what Kiran's saying there, I think that modeling is such an important part of what we do, because it's the sort of the bridge between hearing and investigating and actually moving that into doing. And so, you know, building on that idea, I think there's a lot of trust that we have to carry with us when we're facing a situation where our choices have been perhaps rather than diminished, they've been regulated. You know, we've talked a lot in the last year about you can't plan anything. We keep wanting to plan something, then it gets cancelled. You can't plan. And I my response to that has always been, we've never been able to plan anything. We never know whether it's actually going to happen. All we can do is give it a try. And in the past, before the COVID, we were able to predict that when we planned something, there was a likelihood that it might happen. But it was still a trust. We were just still trusting in the hope that we plan something in a month's time, it's actually going to happen. And we need to just carry on with that, holding on to the trust of, let's make sure that we plan events, that we still have an element of choice, that we still have an element of voice, and that our students are able to find new ways of being able to express their voices. And it's just been incredible to see, with all of the difficulties, and I'm not trying to paint this as if it's been only a story of joy, because people have really suffered over the last year. They've really had a tough time, and we've just heard yesterday that we're going to come back into school a week on Monday. Some of our students are going to come back and some are not. And some of the children have really found it difficult working online. But that having been said, the ideas that teachers have had, that students have had for creating community, despite the fact that we're doing this online, we had a wonderful project with our brilliant music teacher who contacted the State Opera and said, how can we do something with our children? We're not allowed to sing with them in school, so what should we do? And so they had singing class lessons online at home where they were allowed to sing in their bedrooms. You know, we've got a brilliant drama teacher who put on a drama production with the children, and it was the children who were coming up with their ideas in their homes and in their living rooms and doing things on the screen in order to create a play. There, of course, there are lots of examples in schools all over the world of great ideas, but I think that's really important. It's the belief, and then it's having the trust that we will be able to make something happen. And it may be not the way we planned it, but it may turn out to be even more interesting or a variation on that. Then the creativity starts coming through because we trust in ourselves.
Yeah. KIRAN, have you got students in at your school at the moment?
No, I haven't seen them. In fact, you know, when school was full, sometimes I would say, oh my God, when will I have the silence? And now there's a deafening silence. And I keep saying, oh my God, when will they come back? But we've just started the GCSEs, our exams. And so finally there is that sound of laughter back into the campus. So it's lovely. But what we did do, and pulling from what Sarah was talking about, what the team and what happened, how everybody rallied around this opportunity of saying, how do you make a crisis into an opportunity? How do you kind of shift that, right? So one of the things that we realized was the act of movement, the act of fresh air and the fresh mind. So we intentionally crafted these moments of going to the park, you know, and getting the kids out there and playing with them. So I remember the first time we did it, the parents were, oh no, you know, it's going to be really tough. But I kid you not, that's the one thing the kids wake up to say, when can I find three-dimensional human beings, you know, and three-dimensional friends. Yeah. So I feel that was important for the kids to recognize.
Yeah. Sarah and I have discussed that before, haven't we? About the fact everything feels so much in 2D at the moment.
Yeah. Oh.
And that's the important thing of this. You know, I think KIRAN, you've also talked in a very intimate sense online about the importance of using all our senses when we're learning. And you gave a very, very touching reflection on if it's okay for me to talk about, but it's online. But the funerals of your two parents 30 years apart, and the memories that we create when we're able to see and touch and feel and smell, as opposed to the memories that we create when we only have 2 dimensions. And so being able to send our children out into the parks, or at the moment here in Germany, playing in the snow and creating snowmen for each other, and then being able to take photographs of those and share them with each other. But you can't feel the cold of snow if you only see it as a picture. You have to go out there until your fingers are so cold and numb that you have to get back inside again. Baking and taking photographs of that and uploading it, so that all of those sensual, as it were, experiences are still happening, rather than everything being in a 2-dimension and only one, perhaps one or two of our senses being used.
Yeah, no, that is very, very true. And also the other thing I've been trying to share with schools, because I speak to a lot of schools every week, I really want people to enjoy now and not to be wishing this time away. You know, what can we learn from now? And we must still live in the now and be role models and say to our children, don't just think about 2 months when you're vaccinated or you're back in school. Do something really important now. I've got my daughter home from university, so she's been reading. I mean, up until now, I wasn't even sure she could read a book. She can't hear me, can she? And so it's really great that she'll always reflect on this and say, actually, I read a book a week, which my mother had been asking me to do since I was a child, but I was 22 by the time that happened, and that happened during COVID. We're spending lots of family time together, you know, cooking together. So actually, this time will never happen again, because she's in her 20s. She's going to be leaving home and living her own life. So what I've been trying to spread as a message is make the best of now. I know it's hard, you know, not being able to do the things we normally do, but I'm a great believer in making the best of now, because you can't always be looking down the road for when things get better, because something else might happen. And that also brings us back to the beliefs, Kiran. And
Yeah.
so, you know, instilling these beliefs in children. So I've always felt from a very young age that I could change the world and I was here to do something. But my parents were always like, you know, don't you just want to be ordinary? So your school, Kiran, where they're like, Kiran, you're giving them such big ideas, but, you know, I want my child to take over the accountancy firm. Or do you manage to sell this wonderful belief to all the parents too?
You know, I have to say that even if you're an accountant, be a damn good accountant, be a joyous accountant, right? I am not necessarily suggesting that the world has to be changed. I'm saying your world can be changed, right? So, and I think that's the distinction, because when we put the weight of the world on our children, then there's a sense of obligation and this weight on the shoulders of saying, oh my God, then it starts being intimidating. The idea is too large, and then I don't have the skill sets, and I can't do it alone. And that's not really the burden we want to put on our children. You know, eventually they'll grow into learning what part of the world they can make a little bit more just, a little bit more beautiful, a little bit more equitable, right? That's really where we want to take them. So I believe that in the early years, you're just giving them the sense of agency, that I'm capable of taking the piece that I can and do that well. And so I believe the opportunities, or whatever the curriculum, whatever you might call it in a school, must offer enough places and spaces for that to happen. The only thing that we do a lot, and I'm sure Sarah does it in her school, is an iterative process. And I think iteration is the key to understanding learning. Most often than not, we don't give space for iteration. We don't give space for reflection and refinement. We believe it has to be done. A poster is done, a project is done, and it's like pretty much done. But if you're not given that loop to go back to understand, you're less likely to put responsibility into the journey. So when we talk about ethics, or we talk about imagination, there's responsibility to say that something will be better. It's not just a task done and you move on. If it is not user-centered, if it doesn't start with empathy, we will solve the wrong problem. And then what happens is you'll start saying, listen, see, nothing changes. I'll give you a classic example. Most people say, let's clean up the garbage outside. So everybody rushes on a Friday, cleans it up, feels really good for one day, and the garbage is back the next week. Because we didn't bother to look at the people. What is human behavior? Why are people coming and placing the garbage here? Is the garbage bin too far? Who cleans it? So it's that process that asks you to slow down, build a sense of the fact that it's only people that manifest into situations that happen. It doesn't happen magically. So that takes time. And I think for us, we are always struggling in school to say, but where's the time? I have to teach you quadratic equation. I can't smile with you again. I mean, that's too much. So the either or model starts getting into a school. And that's really where the gap there. For the promise every day, or tomorrow, next Thursday, next year. So I think that's again another piece I've learned. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you manage at your school, Sarah, to create time for this reflection so that
Yeah, indeed. I think reflection is a very important part of the loop that you're talking about, Kiran, and it's certainly very much built into the whole international baccalaureate program, and I think many other curricula as well. I think what has been a really helpful tool for us as a school in terms of a process of thinking has also been the brief solution focused trainings that many of us have been a part of, which gives us sort of a common language for looking at what our best hopes are. And our best hopes are based on who we are now and what we are now, what our toolkit is now in terms of resilience skills, in terms of our agency and our voices and our choices. And so we use that language of, so what are our best hopes in this situation? And then what make? It says, can you still hear me? Oh, it just told me that
Yes,
I
yes.
can hear me. And then looking for those little signs. And I picked up on something that Kiran just said, not asking children to have steps towards a goal, which they may never reach, or that it may just feel really daunting. But what are the little signs that you can see that this change is taking place? And so looking at our best hopes, looking at the toolkit that we've got of resources within ourselves, and then what will be the little signs that you'll notice that that change is happening so that we're building a preferred future. And by using that common language, it's very helpful for us to be looking at, you can use it in a child doing a piece of work, you can use that in terms of what are the strategic kind of directions we're going in, what are our personal, professional goals, if you like. But using that language to be able to, as you say, look at who am I now? What have I got now that I can use to be able to perceive my preferred future, and then start to work towards it.
Yeah, that's a really lovely way of putting it. Sarah, could you also tell us about the last 15 years at your school? You've developed a interlingualism program. How have you done that, and how does that benefit the children?
Yes, only we haven't got 17 hours for me to talk about it. That's the only problem.
17 minutes.
I'll do the short version, but I am so privileged because I was the founding head of this campus at the International School of Stuttgart, which is, the school as a whole is older. It was founded in 1985, and then this campus was founded in 2003. And the head of the director of the school at the time was very interested in how children were had difficulties perhaps by the time they got to 14 and 15, and they were German speakers living in Germany in a German culture in their own German family, but they were trying to work out a maths problem in English and then try and translate it back into their home language. And so we started looking into the potential conceptual gaps that happen when children are brought up in one language and are learning in a different language, particularly when they're little, and became quite fascinated by some of the research that was going on, and wondered whether this wouldn't be an opportunity, as we were setting up a new campus, to take a look at whether there was another way of doing that. So the short form of this is, we started off with the very naive thought that we would just have English and German on this campus, and that instead of sending children to German lessons to read German books and sing German songs, and then in their classroom they're doing reading and writing and singing, we thought there's a little bit of imperialism here. We thought, let's bring the German teachers into the classroom, team teach, and actually have an environment in which both of those languages are living in an authentic and valued way. And then, needless to say, very soon after we'd founded this campus and this idea, the first child with a language that was neither nor English came to the campus. And so we started to realize we're really limiting our choice here. and started to explore the ideas of how to bring other languages into the classroom. Very much influenced by Ethne Gallagher and the work that she did on interlingualism. And then, of course, more theoretically with people like Jim Cummins and Ophelia Garcia and such wonderful gurus of the world of language learning who've had such a profound influence on the way that we not only talk about how do we learn a language, but actually value those languages as part of our culture and part of our identity. We then started to explore and to expand the idea of interlingualism. So in our school, people's languages are used actively and for deep thinking and for presentation and for communicating with one another, moving right away from all that stuff that we were doing 30 years of saying, don't speak Urdu or only English, and we've moved away from that kind of imperialistic English environment into everybody being able to use their languages all the time, and then learning also that if we're a majority and we're using a language that other people don't understand, that can be exclusive. So what is the ethical choice there? When do we use language to become inclusive? When do we use language to think deeply? How do we present our identity through the person that we are, which is linked to our language? And so we provide all the opportunities possible for this more interculturally, to develop our intercultural understanding, as well as in an attempt to close that conceptual gap that can happen.
Yeah.
That's the brief version.
Like the version you told me a few days ago about children being able to do assemblies in their own language, even if there's only 3 people that can follow the assembly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so powerful for the child that would be leading that assembly.
Or the first grader who wants to answer a question because she's got to that point where she understands what I've asked and she wants to be able to give her idea and tell her story, but has suddenly realized at the age of 6, I can only speak in Chinese and I don't know how to say what I want to say. And suddenly a little voice piping up at the back and saying in Chinese, what did you want to say? And the 11-year-old talking to the 6-year-old and hearing what's wanted, and then translating that for the whole school to hear, and having the having the environment which allows us to feel free to do that and have the courage to be able to speak up and not feel intimidated by the fact that there's a dominant language. Of course, language, English is the language of instruction, and in the classroom, German and English will be used constantly, but the children know that their language is valued too.
That's really, really wonderful.
Yeah.
Kiran, how do you deal with that in India? Because obviously in India, there's how many languages spoken? I think there's...
Well, we have them all. It's you name it, 28 languages. But I think going back, well, we don't often have the luxury always of being this, I think, intentional and mindful, like how Sarah is saying it, simply because I think here it's such a sort of journey towards freedom, choice, etc. The fact that you can have a powerful command over even one language. I mean, unfortunately, I don't know how it is in Sarah's school, but even literate Hindi or Gujarati is no longer being spoken. So whether you like it, it seems to be more a sort of a way to for what we call just the vernacular, the idea that you're comfortable. So it's often when you have a sense of intimacy, when you break into, I find myself when I'm speaking to my children, I'm berating them in English, but when I have to say intimacies, I'm calling them all these kind of, Hindi words, etc. So I see myself also, fall into, depending on whether you're communicating with a colleague, a friend, a parent, etc. So that continues. But the medium instruction is also English, and it comes to get them into life and to be kind of capable, and then to have really possibilities beyond geography. I think that's really, really critical. So being culturally mindful is important. The idea to understand that there is a cultural sensitivity that you have to build, whether it's within your own communities, whether it is between. So much in India there's so many nuances in the Indian society. I don't want to get into that, but so much of it requires you to be sensitive. you know, just to the, and to, at the bottom of it, like you said, is respect. Can I be valued? Can I have a sense of value? I think everything else aside, I feel that just a smile is the language you need to have first, and everything else follows later.
I completely agree with you, Kiran. I watched some videos of your children at school talking to the caretaker and then talking to a shopkeeper. Clearly, they weren't talking in English to them, and they were talking to them on their level and being very, very respectful.
Yeah.
And I really liked the way they were just flipping. So I'm going to get our audience to join in there, because obviously the three of us could talk for 3 days.
Yes. 17 years.
So I'm going to bring some questions. Right, here we go. So I've got a question here from Eleanor from Frankfurt. She said, how do you promote well-being in your schools at the moment?
Oh, well, I think that's a terrific question. But I have to say that promoting well-being, I think it's at the heart of what we need. I have to kind of put into context and frame it to know when well-being really matters and how you can make how impactful it can be, only if you've been able to have a culture of well-being. You know what, I've seen that if COVID has basically highlighted again, if there were cultures in schools where well-being was not part of the daily practice, we find that so much of the online was actually so difficult to build, because there was this lack of trust between the learner and the teacher in the school. So it is so much more difficult for them to actually build that bridge between, you know, the student and the learning and the teacher, because anyway, it was an interface and not face-to-face. So I believe that it was very easy for us to transfer that, because we'd already had a very strong culture of well-being. So it was easy for us to connect always with stories and start with always the child, not start with a session by itself, open up recess time online. Of course, the breakout rooms were fantastic, but we went further than just the two dimensions. So we actually met physically in different safe spaces. We got the kids to school in smaller groups, just kept that relationship alive. With the parents was very important. So I think the well-being with parents actually went up significantly, because we were able to do a lot more involvement with parents. So suddenly it became a community, not just the child, it became the entire family. So that was a massive opportunity for us to build. So a lot more sessions, smaller groups, stories. Stories was big. I mean, we were big on stories. We were big on laughing. We were big on celebrating. So we took time to do a lot of those, a lot more loudly, you know, if I might use the word loudly in the sense of metaphorically and also physically, saying, yes, and go for it, you know, all of that, but so much more, so that we could really celebrate the child, the learning, etc. So that was very big. So we were big on all of that.
Yeah. And you're right, it has to be a culture that's already in place.
It has to.
Sarah, what about you?
Yeah, the Dalai Lama came out with a wonderful expression that I have a picture somewhere of a tree with its roots, and he talks about the fact that the tree can withstand a great storm.
The oak tree, yes.
Its roots first of all, and I think that speaks to that.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're right. You can't just suddenly start, I don't know, meditating online or something and hoping that people are going to all buy into that. But Eleni, lovely to hear from you, and it's a brilliant question. I think some of the things that have been really good have been like our PE department has produced sort of online films and exercises and competitions for students and anybody else. Actually, the whole families and staff have been invited to clock up the hours that they're and the distances that they're running, and all kinds of movement and get outside stuff has been a very important part of the whole school experience. We've had coffees, certainly with coffees with parents have been, whether it's been coffee, tea or a glass of wine, has been really for families to be able to come together. And you know, I talk about this famous meeting that I had with parents before Christmas, where I'd got some ideas that I was going to be talking about transitioning with them and talking about, how this whole situation is. And I started off the meeting by just saying, so how are you? How's it going? And an hour later I said, I think we're going to have to stop now. I hadn't come to any of the points that I was going to talk about because they simply needed to talk.
Oh.
And it was beautiful. And it was really, they were really important conversations. They were really important stories. They were, it was an opportunity to have that spontaneous conversation that we were talking about failing, to have at the moment, where every meeting is within a certain period of time. And we get to the end of the meeting and go, bye then, lovely to see you. Thank you very much. Bonk, out, back into the next. Hello, how are you? And it's all got an agenda. And that spontaneous conversation, that incidental conversation has to have its space as well. And for the children, we've had a lot of outside activities for them that we've, even when they've been online learning, when they've been in distance learning, getting them out to do things. And also competitions, which have kept that kind of sense of spirit, where it's been really fun. At this time of the year, it's carnival, which we call fashing in this part of the world. And so the whole of this campus has been dressed up in costumes today, and then photographs of them and sticking them on Padlet to get that feeling of the joy is still there, and we're still able to celebrate, even if it's in a different form.
Yeah, and a lot of our alumni came in big time. Yeah. Oh, they called up. They said, we're going to do these advisory circles. We don't want any adults, and we want to have these, moments with the kids. That was fantastic as a community to just bring back and to spend that time talking to children. A lot of cyber safety was dealt with the alumni, saying, listen, the kids are now going to be online. Let's just kind of get them to know what the guardrails are online and where they're not. We're available if you need anything. So emails were exchanged and groups were created. So that gave a lot of the children a lot of comfort that they have so many people rooting for them and championing them and being their safety net. So no problem, if it's not this person, it could be this person. So we just opened up a lot more safety nets. So that was great.
Yeah, I mean, the sense of community has been great. I think a lot of things have changed. So actually, if you sometimes need support now, you haven't got to wait till the next day till you see Sarah again. You can reach her via phone or via Zoom. Because one of the questions is about the response, how you've still created a community, but I think you've both answered that. And for us at ECIS, we haven't been at a conference with our delegates for about 18 months, but I feel our community is stronger than ever because there's so many little snippets of conversation we have, and we actively now keep in touch with people saying, well, in April we'll see them at the conference anyway, or we'll see them in March. So actually it's been a really interesting learning curve for all of us about our communities. And the other thing is,
like you can and the can-dos. We're back into our can-dos again.
Can-dos.
Like you, because you've introduced things like these conversations, which are, I mean, Elaine's just written in there. It feels like soul medicine, and that's what you've been able to give to people through the organisation.
Yeah, sure.
So, I think we've answered the community question, and it's wonderful to be a community. The next thing we are going to do, just for listeners, before I forget to tell you, we are setting up a can-do group, and obviously the three of us will be founding members.
I'm the entertainment committee.
Right, we've got two more questions, so I'm just going to bring them up. Can you?
Okay, cool.
Right. There's a question from Tom. He says, which baby steps can a starting teacher begin with when talking about integrating multiple languages into his or her classroom? I have had the fortune and difficulty at the same time of having children that are not able to speak, read, or write the language of instruction. It is something that takes a lot of time and energy for me, but it is extremely important. Thank you, Tom. That's a really wonderful question. Sarah, I think you can answer that one, please.
I would be delighted to, and I'll say hi to Tom as well. It's a brilliant question, Tom, and we can certainly have some more conversations about this when the meeting's over, because I think it's a longer term answer. But I think there are lots of little strategies that teachers are using in the classrooms for helping children to engage by buddying up children who may be able to, there may be somebody else in the classroom who can speak the same language as they can, or indeed that whole, again, using the community. We've had some wonderful examples of older students from our middle years being able to work with younger students in our younger years, in being able to help them, even online, reading with them in their own language, and then being able to talk about some of the words that they're using. So I think there are various different strategies, working from making sure that we've got a context for children's learning, and that they're given a sort of an emergency kit of the things that they need to be able to say, like, I need your help, or I want to go to the toilet. I think that's probably the most first line for any child in a new school. And then working slowly with the kind of rituals that happen in a class situation, the rhythm of the day, and helping children to gradually work their way into language, but also the whole business of translanguaging, where we're allowing children to use the language that they speak and are familiar with in order to make sense of their new language learning environment. So I'll be very, very happy to have further conversations with you and anybody else out there who's interested in this, because the real experts on that are the people in our classrooms. I think with older children, we work differently than with the very, very little ones. And there's a whole splay of possibilities for taking those little steps to help that be a meaningful environment for children, in which children learn. It's a great question.
I do know Tom, Sarah, so I will connect you both so that you can continue this conversation.
Well, I met Tom when I met you, actually, so so we go back a bit as well.
We've got another question from the lovely Mel, who's a wonderful friend to both of us, Sarah.
Yeah. Hi, Mel.
If you could give some advice or support to international teachers all over the world right now about student well-being, what would it be?
Well, KIRAN?
Well, it's not just for international teachers, for teachers across the world. I think you're not alone. I think one thing that teachers must know very clearly is that you don't have to do this alone. You are not alone. And it's okay to be you, vulnerable. I find that so often when I start, because I also teach, it's just start with what you're feeling, and to recognize that everybody's going through these times together. I found that your children respond beautifully to that. Suddenly you have 50 champions for you. How are you doing? What's happening with you? You know, and they're reaching out to you. And suddenly you realize that all it took for you to invite them into your heart and invite them into your story and make sure that you're not alone. So I find that so many of my teachers have gone through so many tough times personally, either loss of job for their husbands, etc. But the community just rallied around. We reached out, we got the support. If there were people feeling lonely, we made sure that was taken care of. So I feel we often think we have to be strong and we have to kind of brave this out. I feel that find your communities, find your allies, and know that luckily with online, there are so many even online groups. You can just kind of reach out and find your groups. So it's never been more connected and more lonely at the same time. It's an odd paradox.
Yeah, it absolutely is, isn't it? We've never been more lonely or more connected.
Yeah, it's an odd paradox, absolutely.
Face to face, we can attend 2 meetings a day, perhaps, but online, I think I have 5 meetings a day, probably.
Yeah,
yeah. So
I think it's a great takeaway. I mean, I think it is that we hear this in so many of the meetings that people have, and the messages. This plethora of messages of hope that people are sort of sending out on Twitter and sending out in LinkedIn and sending out in webinars. This "we are one" is what really, for me, comes out of COVID, is this sudden realization that people have been telling us over hundreds of thousands or thousands of years that we are actually connected, and we'll never get away from that. And the boundary between me and not me is my space, and we are part of each other's space, and we are part of each other's world. So that we are one, that connectedness, is a big takeaway from this COVID time. And I think one of the things that, Mel, that I would say is for teachers around the world, and by that I mean all educators, leaders, and for me, the caretaker is an educator in our school, and the secretary is the person around which everything revolves, and the people who clean the building are people who are a part of our education. So all of the staff in our schools around the world is being noticed and noticing others. And I think that's how we support each other, is the noticing and being specific about what we're noticing. And one of the things that I've been rather more bold about talking about, perhaps in the last year, than I have done for some years, I think I felt inhibited about misinterpretation, and I don't feel inhibited by it anymore, is love. And
Yeah.
uses that word all the time. And it's about being able to recognize that and notice it and share it. And it's not the sentimentality, but it's real love. It's about being there for one another, holding and noticing.
Yeah, that's such a
It's
wonderful
just
way.
absolutely.
That really is a wonderful way of putting it. Thank you, Sarah. And we do have people in the community reach out to us all the time. I had a teacher from Germany send me an email, and he said that his mom's in Welling. That's the place where I live. It's a little village about 20 miles outside London. So I immediately set my phone number and said to his mom, I'll connect with you, I'll come see you, because she's actually been vaccinated. And it's not really something that would have happened pre-COVID. So it's really nice that we're finding all these different links, and we are in all this together. And I think what COVID has shown us is we're very much caretakers of everything we do, because this too will pass.
Yeah.
So we're
true.
coming to the end of our conversation. Does anybody else have any questions for the wonderful Kiran and Sarah before we finish?
Come on, bring it on. Yes, you can.
That's a wonderful way to finish. Yes, you can.
Yes.
So if there's anything at all ECIS can do to serve you or help you with, just drop us an email. We're absolutely here for you 100%. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Kiran. Wonderful to see you, and I look forward to continuing to work with you in the future.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody. Stay safe. And remember, we're all in this together.
We are.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.